Jeff Meeks testified he worked for R. Kelly for 15 years. He was first an unpaid intern starting in 2002, and then over the years he was promoted to various other positions. When he stopped working for Kelly in 2019, he was a sound engineer, and he's listed on the credits for several R. Kelly songs. Meeks told the jury he never witnessed any forms of abuse involving Kelly and his girlfriends. He said Kelly's girlfriends would come around and everything seemed normal to him. Under cross-examination, Meeks said he did have to sign a confidentiality agreement, so he could never really talk about what he saw or heard. And he says he did stop working for Kelly from 2010 to 2014, so he could not speak to what Kelly was doing during that time with his girlfriends. When asked if he wanted to see Kelly convicted, Meeks said no. Prosecutors pointed out that Meeks' livelihood financially has been tied to Kelly for years, so that's why Meeks does not want to see R. Kelly convicted. The second person to testify was John Holder, Kelly's former accountant and business manager. He said he worked for Kelly from 2018 to 2019, and that he also traveled with Kelly to different shows to make sure he was being properly paid. Holder says Kelly would give his girlfriends cash to buy whatever they wanted, and he testified he never witnessed seeing Kelly hit his girlfriends, and he never saw them crying. Holder said Kelly's girlfriends were always dressed appropriately and that they were not forced to leave the room when he was around, and he did speak to them and they spoke to him. I'm Dray Clark for Start Your Day.
All right, with this trial nearing its close, we want to bring in Justice Correspondent Candice Kelly to discuss this case. Once again, good morning, Candice. As you just heard Dray say, the two witnesses took the stand yesterday. We had a sound engineer, Meeks, and his accountant, Holder, giving similar testimony. I wonder what you feel overall as far as what the defense team has been doing, how they're doing with this jury so far.
Well, you know, when it comes to the defense team, let's think about the fact that they just have to plant the seed of a reasonable doubt. It's very, very hard to stack up their 6 witnesses with the 45 witnesses that the prosecution has called over the past 4 weeks. I think that they're doing a good job in saying, all right, there are people who said that they have seen nothing going wrong, like these 2 witnesses that took the stand yesterday, in terms of they didn't see anybody chained up or locked up or abused. But it seems like every time cross comes about by the prosecution, they get the witnesses on something. It happened with these 2 witnesses in particular because they have a financial interest. Or there was one time when the sound engineer that Dray made reference to in his package was asked, well, don't you remember telling the feds before that you were relieved to see one of the girls leaving out of the studio or leaving out of the house? And he said, yeah, I was relieved amongst a bunch of other things. So it's just an interesting nuance to think about. Somebody would be relieved to see someone being able to leave a studio. So these are the things that the prosecution is honing in on, that even though there are witnesses for the defense that are saying, hey, everything was great, the federal, for the prosecution, always comes back and knocks them down a few pegs.
Yeah, so you're saying the testimony's not holding up under cross. So sex trafficking, racketeering charges here. Once again, Candace, all they need is one juror, right?
That's right.
You got to show some reasonable doubt. You got to have a consensus when it comes to convicting R. Kelly in this situation. Once again, with what the defense has been able to put out there, reasonable doubt. When it comes to these particular charges, what is your gut telling you? Have they done their job, the defense, have they done their job to put that seed of reasonable doubt in at least one of the jurors' heads?
You know, I think it's enough for discussion and deliberation. The defense did not have a lot to work with, right? But in terms of your specific question, is there reasonable doubt? Honestly, they say the jury, you know, that the jury's out on that. It's going to be something that those who are part of the jury are going to have to discuss. My personal feelings are that the reasonable doubt does not hold up. The reasonable doubt, the seeds that they have tried to plant, don't make any sense when you think about all of the aggregating facts that we've heard about over the past 4 weeks. So that's one way to look at it. But in terms of, hey, let's open the door and bring some people in who said everything was fine, well, then I think that there has been a seed planted. What would really plant this seed, and I've talked about this throughout the week, is that if you had a young woman, maybe even a current or former girlfriend of R. Kelly, say that everything's being misread, everything is being misunderstood, that would be reasonable doubt enough for me to start looking at the case in a different way, hearing somebody's first person perspective who was on the side of R. Kelly, who might still be, in his life in some way, be connected with him, or who was connected with him.
Yeah. Is that something you haven't seen a woman come out? That would have actually helped them a little bit. We haven't seen a woman for the defense. We've all seen these men doing that. How do you think that's playing?
Listen, they need a woman. The woman that he has on his side now, and this is probably why he did this when he had a shakeup in his attorneys, are his attorneys. His lead attorney is a woman. She is the one who, in her position, is speaking on his behalf in a way by asking questions that, of course, lend themselves to R. Kelly's defense. But we haven't seen any women, and that's a big deal. We have seen women who might have seemed kind of impartial. Like we heard from a manager who was with him for a number of years, and she didn't seem like one way or the other that she was kind of taking his side or not, that she stopped herself in terms of being in his personal life at the bedroom door. She said, "I really don't cross that." But the fact that she was talking about how these young women just didn't have, the ability to roam or speak to men, or that she had to manage them every step of the way. This was not a victim, but even the women who were not victims, they did speak to this kind of coercion factor that was involved if you were part of R. Kelly's life, his entourage, or even his employee. So even the women who weren't victims, it just didn't play out well. He needs someone who's a female at the end of the day.
Yeah, and it shows still that he's in control. He has a lot of control over the women, and obviously the attorney, well, she's being paid to do her job, and I understand the jury is going to recognize that as well. Finally, before I let you go, it came out yesterday that, as expected, R. Kelly's not expected to testify in his trial, even though the judge did leave the door open and say you can change your mind a little bit later. Closing arguments could begin as early as today. So if you're both sides, what's your game plan? What is the final thing that you want to have stuck in the jury's head before they go to deliberation?
So the prosecution is going to remind everybody in closing arguments of the litany of witnesses, right? The aggregation of all these people. Whether or not you might believe one or not, you have to look at the whole picture. Where did these dozen of women come from and that are not connected? And how did this happen, right? They heard recordings that we didn't hear. On the defense's side, I would want to hone in on this idea that did R. Kelly need that much help in recruiting anybody? He was a superstar. By his very nature, people were throwing themselves at this man. And don't stars have to act in a way that kind of protects their home, protects whatever circle they are in. Like when they go out to a store or a restaurant, there have to be rules in place. It may be a little bit eccentric, it may not be what you do, but he was an international superstar, still is, right? We're still talking about him. So these are the things that I would hone in on. And finally, that the girls knew that when they were going into the world of R. Kelly, and if they wanted to be a groupie, sometimes along with being a groupie, these things might happen. And how could you not have known that this may not have happened? Now, of course, to the extent that it happened is where the defense is going to have to limit themselves. But those are the things that I would highlight to shed a little bit of light about what goes in the world of an international superstar.
Yeah, and we need to point out, even if they did know something like that would happen, if he goes through with it, he's still guilty of it happening. So he's still in the wrong. Justice Correspondent Candice Kelly, of course, thank you for your information. We will check back in with you a little bit later on in the show with more on this case, which could be winding down very shortly.